Greetings and welcome to this week's weekly update. My name is Jay Keskett and I'm the associate pastor here at Faith United. This week I am excited to come to you from the Memory Garden. I understand that this is where the congregation does their butterfly release, and I can't think of a more beautiful setting to come to you from on this beautiful day for our weekly update. Many of you know that the New Beginnings team is the group of faithful persons from this congregation who are leading the way on discussions about how to reopen, when to reopen, all of those sorts of things. One of the conversations that the New Beginnings team had at the very beginning is how to ground our work. And I was really impressed that they chose the 3 simple rules as one of the ways to ground our work and our conversation together. These 3 simple rules are do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. And I thought for this week, in the midst of all of the complexity of life, in the midst of all that many of us have going on in our lives right now, it might be helpful for us to have a reminder that we can return to a more simple framework for how we think about our lives and our work if we come back to these 3 simple rules: do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. I want to read to you a very brief excerpt from this book that was written on the 3 simple rules by Reuben P. Job. When asked which commandment was most important, Jesus responded, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." Here we have found the foundation and instruction for the faithful and good life in every age. It is both a simple and profound statement. It is easy to comprehend and challenging to attempt. And it remains a guide to the highest form of faithfulness and continues to hold the promise of a way of life that is both rewarding and fruitful in furthering God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. The 3 simple rules, I believe, are one way that we can stay true to the commandment that Jesus gave us to love the Lord our God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. One of the ways that we are doing good here in this congregation comes by way of the mission boxes, which have been put together by Amy and her team with the youth ministry. This is Kathy's box that she signed up for, and she allowed us to borrow it for this weekly update. Take just a second to look at the wonderful things that are in the mission box here. There's a daily devotion that goes along with each day's project. There's fabric for a tie blanket. There are brownies that you can give to your neighbor. There are lots of really great things in here, and we are already hearing and seeing from Amy pictures from the ways that all of you who signed up for one of these boxes are engaging with them and doing good in your communities and in your family by way of this mission project. One of the other ways that we do good and stay in love with God is through our engagement with worship each week. And last week, Pastor Steve led us into a new worship series called Great Faith, Lessons from Luke, where we are wrestling with this question: what does it mean to have great faith? This first message in the series was called Faith in Community and was all about the paralyzed man whose friends surrounded him and took him before Jesus and lowered him down through the roof, and really serves to remind us all that the community of faith is a community that brings healing, is a community that brings restoration, is a community that brings forgiveness and grace. I encourage you to continue thinking about all of the ways that you can partner with God in that incredible work. And now I'll turn it over to Pastor Steve so that he can give us an update on what is coming for this coming Sunday.
Thank you, Jake. And in addition to last week's Sunday Worship by Wire, which you can click to see and share, I want to invite you to begin to think about this coming Sunday, August 9th, where we will be in our second Sunday of our Great Faith Lessons of Luke series. And along those lines, we're inviting you to help shape the hymns, the praise songs, and even some stories about great faith that you can share either in your own life about somebody who's touched your experience, somebody who's modeled great faith, or perhaps a biblical story that's meant a lot to you. Again, those favorite hymns, particularly hymns that have spoken to you and helped shape your faith. So those links are below, and we want to invite you to fill that out so you can help shape our worship. We're also inviting you to fill out a survey that will help shape our planning for worship for the fall, winter, and spring. We're looking at different worship series ideas and various ideas for spiritual formation. Our team is going to be meeting next week to look at some of those. So please fill out those surveys. Let us know what you think is going to be most important for us to focus on in worship this fall and winter and spring. Speaking of worship, I want to share with you an update from our New Beginnings team. They met this week on Wednesday night, and it's the first time that we were able to meet since I've been back from vacation. And they've been working really hard on putting the final touches to the policies and protocols about how we can return to worship in person, as well as how we can return to in-person small group gatherings. And we were working on this on Wednesday night, and we paused to say, let's ask ourselves a bigger question. Let's ask ourselves, if we had all of our practices and protocols ready to go and everybody's in agreement. Let's say we've got our live streaming ready to go and everything's set. Let's say we got all the signage and hand sanitizer. Everything's ready. Are we ready to open the church for in-person worship? In other words, is that the thing that is keeping us from having in-person worship, or is there other factors? Everybody agreed that no. If we had everything in place, we still don't feel it's safe to have in-person worship. And so we began to really dig into what is the criteria for us to open for in-person worship. And we went back to those three simple rules. And we couldn't in good conscience determine that it's safe to come back for in-person worship, that we could do that without causing harm, that we could do that and still do a greater good for our community and for the congregation. As long as those numbers for the infections continue to rise, as long as we're seeing in the news that Ohio is a hot spot. Recently this week, you may have seen Governor DeWine shared an example, and I'm going to provide for you the slide of this graph. It's a real life example in Ohio of somebody who went to church and was infected with COVID, perhaps didn't know he was, infected 90 people, and those 90 people subsequently have impacted others, and that wave is still continuing. I would hate for us to be that church. The New Beginnings team wants to avoid that. I heard also this week a good friend and colleague of mine, a pastor of United Methodist Church in the East Ohio Conference, a similar sized church. They opened for in-person worship in July, and by the end of July, the pastor tested positive for COVID-19, and now they've shut back down and they've gone away from in-person worship. So we're trying to be proactive, we're trying to be sensible, and we try to ask ourselves, what is the criteria for being able to open for in-person worship? And we go back to the simple rules: do no harm, do good, stay in love with God. And so the criteria really needs to be when we see the numbers begin to decrease. And when we hear the health professionals say it's okay to have gatherings of larger groups. Still, the health department is saying it's best to have groups less than 10 people or less to gather. So we know that it's difficult to simply go week to week and not know when we're going to be able to get together for worship. So together they reached a consensus, and the consensus is that we don't anticipate being able to open for in-person worship anytime before the first Sunday in Advent. That's November 29th. I know that this is heavy news for most of us, and we've been at this now for over 4 months. We're talking about another 4 months of doing worship by wire and not coming together to be in person. At the same time, we've shown ourselves that we can do this. We are showing that we can be the church and that we can still engage in worship, that we can still reach out and connect to one another. It's amazing to see how the Jake gatherings are going through Zoom conferences, how our meetings are continuing, how trustees, finance, stewardship, spiritual formation, youth ministry, all of these teams are continuing to be the church and go about the business and important work of the church. So we can do this. We can do this for another 4 months until we know it's safe. And the other factor that they looked at there is, again, what's going to be the safest thing for our community? If we continue to do worship by wire, we can focus our energies on online opportunities to reach more people in our community safely. But if we have to try to juggle how to meet in person and to do those things at the risk of one person getting infected that can cause others in our community, then we've done a great disservice in our community that really is against our very core values of what it means to be Christians, what it means to be the church, what it means to truly do all that we can to do no harm, to do good, and to stay in love with God. I want to share with you that according to those who have been following the reports about the vaccine, that it's my understanding from them that the vaccine is in the trial stages, and it is possibly to expect that in October, military professionals and personnel will be vaccinated in October. And they will be the ones deployed to start vaccinating the general public, starting with the older population sometime in November. We don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it's very encouraging to think that we're moving in that direction, that we're going to see the other side of this, and we can just hold on for these next 4 months to see. Now, if the conditions change, vaccine is starting to be distributed tomorrow and the numbers are going down, absolutely, we'll reconsider and maybe open up earlier. At the same time, if we get to November 29th and Ohio is a hot spot, numbers are soaring, people going back to school has exacerbated the problem, we may have to push that back. But it's our hope and prayer that we can safely be back in worship on November 29th. One piece that we also began to talk about is, what about small groups? Many of you are saying, when can we get together with my small group? And we're hoping that we can arrive at a plan to start allowing groups of 10 or less to meet sooner than that end of November date. But we didn't get to iron all that out. We're meeting again next Wednesday, and we're going to focus on small groups and how is it that we could possibly begin to invite people to come by appointment to be trained and to provide ministries physically together in small groups, but doing that safely. So I commend you and ask your continued steadfastness and patience and prayer. Continue to reach out. We're going to be reaching out to people in lots of new ways. To that end, we are beginning to organize callers. Now, we've done some of that early in the pandemic. We're going to reinvigorate callers, and we're going to add to those calls another dimension. So first, people are going to call and ask how you're doing. They want to hear how you're holding up in the pandemic. Do you have prayer concerns? But then they're going to be asking you about some information to update our database. We still are missing birth dates for a lot of people in our database. We still don't know the grades of many of our children, and that changes depending on families. And so we're going to ask for your help. We want to know about your time and talents and gifts and skills. We're going to really take this opportunity during the staying at home pandemic to update our databases, which is going to go a great distance to help us connect with one another more efficiently and better for ministry. If you would like to be a trained caller, we're in the stage of recruiting callers now, please contact me, Pastor Steve, and we'll put you on that list, and we'd love to get you trained. We're hoping to make those calls beginning here sometime in the next couple of weeks.
As you know, Camp Read a Lot wrapped up last week, and we continue to celebrate all of the work that went into Camp Read a Lot to make that a virtual experience this year. I want you to check out a couple of pictures that were sent in to celebrate that Camp Read a Lot ministry. I also want to let you know that it has been a joy to work with Kathy Schmucker, our Director of Spiritual Formation, and Kathy has lifted up a few things for our weekly update this week. The first is that we are still planning for fall groups, though we don't know exactly what shape those will take this year. We do know that fall groups are an important part of the discipleship process here at Faith United. And so if you are looking to be a part of or lead a fall group, I encourage you to reach out to Kathy Schmucker. Her email will be listed below, and she can help you with that process. The other thing that Kathy wanted me to lift up for this week's weekly update is our back to school blessing, which will take place on August 23rd. It is my understanding that we give a special gift to the kindergartners who are starting school for the first time this year. So please let us know if you know of any kindergartners that will be starting school. And just also know that this back to school blessing is not only for students, but we also want to send the teachers and the staff and the administrators back to school, especially this year in light of COVID-19, with a blessing. So be sure to look for that service on August 23rd.
I also meant to mention when I was talking about the New Beginnings plan for reopening no sooner than November 29th that we talked that over with our lay leaders, Tom Wigg, Bernie Minor, and Jessica Stroya. And while they also resonate with the desire to get back together for in-person worship, they affirm and support that recommendation so that we can move forward again with our planning for this fall and looking forward to hopefully having in-person worship starting in Advent. Want to thank you for signing up, those 60 plus people who have been part of the Jake gatherings. If you've not done that, please go ahead and take the opportunity to do that. We're putting everything in place to make that as easy as possible. We've got a how-to video that you can click on to show you how to register. And we've got 2 links to how-to videos for how to do Zoom. And in addition to that, you can call Amanda Englehart, our administrative assistant. She's willing to walk you through setting up Zoom. If you do that, try to reach out to her a day before your scheduled Zoom meeting. But those are going really well. And again, it's going to be a while before we're able to be in person with Jake. So please take the opportunity and schedule to be part of one of those getting to know you gatherings. I want to lift up some prayers for us this week. I want to pray for Rachel Harper. You will recall that we were praying for Rachel when she was diagnosed with leukemia, and then she had bone marrow transplant. Things were going so well, and I just heard this week that the cancer has returned. So prayers for Rachel Harper and her family. And prayers for Pam Gable. Pam had surgery this week on her elbow to repair an injury from an accident. I invite you to wrap up our time of this weekly update in prayer. Oh God, we give you thanks for each day that you create and bless and call it good, for every day is filled with abundance of opportunities to rejoice and be glad and to share your love and your kindness. Even in this time of pandemic, Lord, you continue to bless us and show us your presence. So help us to continue to lean into that, to continue to weather through these challenging times and continue to reach out to one another as we stay connected as a body of Christ. In your name we pray. Amen.